Hello, listeners and viewers, and welcome to episode 53 of the Twinsies podcast. I'm Lucas Cook.
And I'm Dan Blewett, and we are in our office today. We've had some electrical difficulties in the facility. Our landlord is hopefully working on it to get our main lights fixed.
Yeah, but if you're out there in podcast land and you know why our main lights turn on, but then trip the breaker 2.5 minutes into being on every time, you tell me why. If there's like a frayed wire somewhere.
This whole building seems like it was made by like Keebler elves or something, and safe to say the wiring's garbage.
Yeah, poor Keebler elves who didn't have access to like real building materials.
Yeah, they're not certified elves.
Like we have, instead of wires, we just have tinfoil that's crinkled up and rolled throughout our facility.
Yeah, it's old gum wrappers just stitched together.
Yeah, and it's not held up with any actual wood. It's all series of drywall packed together.
Yep, and it's just excess cookie frosting.
Yeah, as caulk, just cookie frosting everywhere.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know. We lick these walls. They're probably sugary, but you know.
Yeah. Next tornado that touches down within like 50 miles of here, this whole place is gonna blow into the wind like Dorothy.
Yep.
But you just got back from a trip.
Yep. One of my best friends back home is getting married, so bachelor party this weekend, and out in the country, and it was a fun trip. I'm not antisocial, but I don't get along with massive groups. But it was actually a really good time with like 12 guys I didn't know too well. I knew a couple of them prior from college. My friend Andrew and I went to the same college for the first 3 semesters. Then he transferred away. And so I'd gone to his college a couple of times just to visit. So I'd met a couple of his buddies that were there. But it was a really good time, really good people, and threw a lot of rocks. It's funny when you get the group was about a half former athletes and half not. But there was this big farmhouse that we stayed in. And right next to it, there was this old dairy barn where they used to milk cows inside. It was like it looks like, as if it was like bombed or something. It was probably hadn't been used for maybe 10 years. It was just, inside, just broken glass. It was just destroyed. But in this gravel drive, there were just tons and tons of rocks because it was gravel. So naturally, for like probably 3 hours combined of the whole 2 days that we were there, we just threw rocks at the barn. And it was amazing. I don't know why. Like, I could throw rocks at stuff literally all day, and it never stops getting fun.
Well, I also like the fact that you traveled like halfway across the country to go throw rocks at something. You can do that anywhere.
Throwing rocks was like 10% of the itinerary, as it turned out.
Yeah, I like in my brain he like sent out. You don't do this for a bachelor party, but he sent out like a save the date where it's like, like 10 a.m. breakfast, 11 a.m. throw rocks, like noon lunch, 2:30 throw rocks.
You like couldn't pull us away from it because you're always one rock away from like making something smash. Or
our whitewater rafting appointment's in 2 hours. More rocks. We're good. But look at we still have all these rocks.
But there was a hole in this like metal roofing where you could see that someone like shot like a BB gun, and there was like a hole. So like, all right, we tried to throw rocks through the hole for a while, and then we realized that if you threw it hard enough and hit it in the right spot, it would actually pierce the metal siding.
Oh, nice.
So then we started throwing them super hard, trying to poke a hole. Only one guy got it just right with like a good rock in the right spot, and just there was all the windows were broken out, unfortunately. So we tried to hit the little shards that were still left.
Somebody beat you to it
around the edges, yeah. But it was that was kind of highlighted my trip. Played a lot of wiffle ball and went whitewater rafting.
That's like when you're a 12-year-old. And like your 3 buddies pull up on their bikes and they're like, "Lucas, we're gonna go throw rocks in the quarry," and you're like, "Okay, I'm coming."
Yeah, no. If this was like a weekend for 12-year-olds, it wouldn't have been probably vastly different. It was just.
Well, that's good.
It was what it was, but whitewater rafting was cool. Didn't get kicked out of the boat, which was good, or tossed out of the boat. The water was typically this was like a middle tier session, good for like beginners and I don't know people who've done it like once or twice before, but. It rained so much that they said the water level was normally 1.5 to 2.5 feet, but it was 9 feet for us there.
Does that make for more turbulent water?
Yeah, and it makes it a lot faster. So the trip usually takes like 3 hours, the 7 miles or whatever. It took us only like an hour and change.
Anybody have any close calls of getting tossed out?
Not on our boat. Myself and Andrew, we rowed in the front, so we were like the main like paddlers. We were leading the charge. I think we did a reasonable job, but out of the whole group, it was like 10 boats or something. I only think 2 people got tossed out. So,
were you sore after? for the next day?
No, but it was tiring. I mean, it was a lot of
Yeah,
paddling.
rowing is
obviously.
no joke,
It's,
especially whitewater after rowing.
Yeah, but it was interesting. Just like it's kind of like reminded me like biking because they taught us basic stuff about the rafts. Like you don't want to hit big waves sideways. Obviously, you don't want to if you get stuck on a raft or you get stuck against a rock. Everyone has to like run to the side that's like stuck real quick, or else the water's gonna eventually like quickly push the boat over. Same thing if you hit the front of the rock, like the water's gonna start pushing it up, and then it's gonna fall back, and everyone's gonna get dumped out. So they gave us that basic stuff, but that didn't happen because most of the rocks are underwater. On this trip, some of the big ones are still up, but
that's what I was curious about. Like when you said it's went from 2 feet to 9 feet. I almost thought that like higher up like that, it would kind of displace some of the rockiness of the bottom and smooth it out, but I guess not. Huh?
I think it does, but
it makes it way faster.
But the spots where it still hits those rocks, like they're still underwater and it's still like cascades or whatever it does under, it was still there was just a lot of water. So previously I guess on this one there wasn't going to be a guide in the boat. There was just going to be a guide or a couple guides just like around, like shouting directions, and we were just in the boat ourselves. But because the water was that high, we had to have a guide in every boat. Which,
yeah, because I was thinking when you said like
if we hadn't, we would have definitely flipped like many times because we didn't know where to go or like which spots to take and like which parts were like more dangerous than others. And there were some pretty big waves that we hit that without our guide, I don't know what we would have done.
Clearly, like you have like life jackets on and stuff, but like I wonder what happens if, like you said, you completely capsize, all 8 guys or whatever fall out, and your raft just like goes down the river. There's a big net down there that catches all the bodies in the rafts.
Yeah, I don't know, but it just seems very sketchy at times.
I would think. I mean, water is inherently dangerous, and if were there guys in your group that couldn't swim? Do you know?
Not in ours, no, but. They the main thing they talked about, they warned us about, they said do not stand up if you get out. Like if you stand up in the river, you could just get knocked over, and then your foot gets caught underneath a rock or a tree underneath, and then you're just stuck underneath the water as it rushes and keeps pushing you down, and that's how you die. So gross. They said just stay on your butt, keep your feet up and your head out of the water, and you'll pretty much be fine. But like a lot of these big things where they go over a rock, the water kind of like recirculates on itself. They call those hydraulics, I guess. And I watched a bunch of whitewater rafting videos afterwards because we did some class 4s. Those are the highest on our trip. But looking at some of the class 5s, and there's tons of footage, I guess, from other state parks where there's like big hydraulics and waves and stuff, like these big like chaos spots where people just like camp out and like just film the rafters as they hit these like legendary little rapids, and then just get like tossed out, and everyone's just getting like. It's like a melee. And I'm like, I don't really feel like I want to be a part of that. Like, you definitely felt the urge of, like, the waves were the fun part, and you wanted to, like, see the big ones. Like, oh, that's, like, your rush. But at the same time, I watched some of these people in these videos, like, just getting circulated and just, like, staying in one spot, and they're just, like, and they're just not going anywhere and just freaking out. And I'm like, I don't know. That's not really...
Well, that's funny.
That doesn't seem fun.
I was going to ask what I thought was going to be an ignorant question, but... when people do this, is there a goal, or you're just kind of like, or you're like, there's a thing over there, let's go like try to ramp off that thing? Like, is there a objective?
That's a good question. Well, so our guide, we hit more of the rapids than it seemed like others did, because he was like, yeah, so here's this, here's the big spots or whatever. We're just gonna go through it. Just we got to paddle really hard, but we'll hit it head on. So he kind of like found a balance where he wanted us to like have fun and like hit the rapids and not just avoid everything, because you could just try to avoid as much as you could, but he was steering us away from spots where like he knew if we went into it, like we weren't going to come out of it pretty much. So there's a balance where you don't want to just avoid everything and you don't want to hit everything either. You want to try to know the difference. But again, if he wasn't in the boat with us, we would have just like done random stuff and got tossed around against rocks. So
that sounds fun.
But yeah, it was cool. I enjoyed it. But my friend Andrew, he said on a previous trip on a heavier like class 5 run, like a pretty like gnarly one, he said that he got tossed out of the boat and then got pinned against a big rock, and then another different boat came behind him and like pinned him against the rock some more. So he said he literally thought he was going to die because water was like rushing over him and he was stuck against this rock.
That's an unpleasant scenario.
Not ideal, but he's still here. He's still kicking it. So yeah, but I mean, a lot of others, and it was kind of the same thing like when we did the incline. Like there were just like men, women of all ages doing it. So it's not like it's like the deadliest thing on earth, but it just depends on like your circumstance. It seems like random. If you get tossed out, You know, you just try to, like, most people don't drown, but
Right.
you could be in that terrifying situation where you're just not really moving and just like spinning you underwater for a little while or on top of the water for a while, and they just said just will like spin you around until it wants to like spit you out. Because some of that water stays there, and then a lot of it just like, you know, it obviously has to keep moving eventually. But
Mother Nature.
anyway, yep, new adventures. So
Here's a question I just thought of. If you're this is topical. If you're one of the houses in South Carolina, are you leaving or are you staying? Like, you hear all those people that like they stay in their houses despite the fact that they're like, get out, get out, get out. But then you realize that those people either like they don't have enough money to like go and just be out of their house for 2 weeks or whatever. But apparently some of those people are just like, yeah, we've had hurricanes before. Like, I'm just gonna hang out. Do you leave your house?
I think I do. I don't think I prefer to put myself in needlessly dangerous situations. I think I also believe I'm immortal, so I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll be fine. But there's like times when you're just like not fine, then you're just like, oh.
Yeah.
I think I read that a lot of people found themselves in that situation this time, where it was just like water kept rising, and now they're like, oh crap, I got to be rescued.
Yep.
So,
well, and that's like, you know, you feel two ways about, especially like the first responders, where they're like, golly darn it, we told you guys to leave, and now I have to go in there and risk my life potentially to save you. But at also at the same time, you get it from the other perspective, where people are just like, my house is potentially like my worldly possession, and it's like, am I gonna leave this and then just like have it get destroyed and have nothing? I don't know. Like, I could see the psyche of some of the people who like stuck around, and there is like that mentality, especially like being in Central Illinois. We have tornadoes where it's like, what are the chance? Like, I'll be fine. Like, no one ever really. Two different things, but you kind of get it. But I just always feel bad for those first responders who have to like go in and save people who are told to leave. But it's like,
yeah, but it's not like you're gonna do anything for your house. That's what I don't get. It's like, if you're there, you're not like punching the hurricane in the face.
get out of here, hurricane.
Bailing water. You're just there to watch your house get destroyed or watch it not get destroyed. So the outcome is the same whether you stay or leave. So
right.
I don't know.
Or what I was listening to one radio program that like people had pets, and a lot of the city, you know, had places for people to go, but they didn't really have places for pets to go, because like there was a pet friendly shelter, but you had to show up with like documentation of your pet's like shots and stuff, and people didn't like have that, so they can't accept their pets into these places. So people are like, well, I'm going to stay in my house with my pets so my pets don't die. And it's like, okay. But anyway,
that sounds a little more noble. Makes a little more sense, but
yeah,
I don't know. Just drive your car out and just like sleep in your car for like a couple days.
Yeah.
Although I guess I don't really know the mechanics of all of it.
Yeah. But anywho, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. I want to talk about, we've been doing with our senders organization, early in the off season, we've kind of been going over everyone's swings, kind of establishing up front for the winter off season what the one or two adjustments that they need to make over the winter are. Because with 14, 15, 16-year-olds, you know, they're kind of old in terms of their swing development. So you're kind of just like working on a thing or two that's going to improve their power, their bat speed, or the amount of time their barrel stays in the zone, how well they can handle pitches in different parts of the plate, that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's always been a big deal for me, but I've noticed that it's extra prevalent, maybe more prevalent than I had initially thought as I've been going over these videos, is really, really poor front sides. And so I'm going to go through all of this and explain what all of it is. But basically, you know, it was a couple years ago that Josh Donaldson went on, I think it was on MLB Network.
Chick-fil-A coffee this morning?
Yeah, I stopped at Chick-fil-A and I got 30 nuggets.
What?
Yeah.
Is that $14? Is that 4 8-packs or 3 12-packs?
I don't know. I was like, because it was breakfast. This was a couple days ago. I did it for the first time. I was like, it was breakfast, and I like didn't want any of their like biscuits or anything. But and so I was like, you guys do nuggets this time of morning? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, what are the quantities of nugget I can get? And they were like 6, 12, or 30. And I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna do 30 because like 12's not really enough.
No.
So anyway,
$14 for 30 nuggets.
Not bad. So I went home and made some white rice and then just dumped the nuggets in there with some sweet sriracha sauce. Really good. So now that's like my new thing. And then I got a coffee this morning.
How much pounds of chicken do you think that is? That's probably
1.5. You think?
That seems plausible. I mean, each of those nuggets is probably an ounce, maybe. I mean, they're this big.
Yeah.
Probably an ounce.
So that math checks out. Maybe a little more.
2 pounds.
Maybe 2 pounds.
Maybe $7, $8 a pound for chicken nuggets.
Which I try to get about a pound of meat in any given sitting. So that makes sense. Because usually, like, I finished, the first time I got it, I finished it in one sitting, and then afterwards did not feel great. And then, so I'm like, I think this is probably a 2-sitter. Yeah. Well, I got to like 8 nuggets left and like half a cup of rice, and I was like, well, I can't leave this. So I had to finish it. But anyway, it's delicious. What in the heck was I talking about?
You're rambling about hitting or something.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Josh Donaldson. If you don't know who he is, you can look him up. He plays for the Blue Jays. He's a good hitter.
Does he? He doesn't. Not anymore.
Oh,
who's he play for now? I think the Indians.
Indians? Okay. Well, he used to play for the Blue Jays. I don't really keep up with that kind of stuff. But anyway, he goes on MLB Tonight, and he's talking about like, oh, you know, when I hit, you know, all the hitting instructors out there are teaching it wrong. When you are teaching a hitter to hit, you have to teach them that. Well, I guess I got to back up. So the very first thing that you do when you hit is you're in your little stance, you're in your batter stance, and the very first thing you do is load. So you basically work away from the baseball, just like you would if I was gonna punch Dan in the face, the first thing I would do is reach back. If I was gonna jump up in the air, the very first thing I would do is move down, is squat down. So it's just like a negative movement or a counter movement. But that movement is initiated by 99% of hitters by moving their front foot. So if you watch a baseball or a softball game, and you watch a hitter's front feet, they do different things. Some people have big leg kicks, some people have little ones, some people stride forward, some people just like pick up their front heel and set it down, all kinds of different things. But the fundamental concept is you pick it up, or you lift it up off the ground, which almost by definition is shifting your weight into your back leg. That's that negative movement. And then you get your foot back down on the ground and swing. But his argument was, well, you know, I start that movement with my front foot, I pick it up, all my weight goes back. And then when I go to get my foot down, I start to open my hips. So I land with my foot open, and thereby starting my hips, starting my rotation, which is a fundamental principle of hitting, that you're trying to initiate everything from your lower half. So the idea is, and the same thing kind of rings true in pitching, that we're trying to establish separation between our hips and our shoulders. So our hips start going, our shoulders stay just for a tiny fraction of a second, which leads to this sort of torque through your trunk. And then there's a release when your shoulders finally do come through, your hands come through, your barrels come through, and it makes you more powerful. So his argument was, well, I land open to start those hips, which helps that establish that separation. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, we've been doing it wrong this whole time. John Donaldson's a genius. I have 2 issues with that. Number one, if you actually watch Donaldson hit in game, it's not as exaggerated as he makes it seem in that video. He lands pretty close. And I would argue, because I've done this for the last however many years, that if you go and you look at all the best hitters in the MLB and you freeze them all at heel strike, you can do this at home. Freeze all of them right as their front heel is hitting the ground, and look at their front foot and kind of their front hip. Their front foot is almost always parallel with the front line of the batter's box. And then their front hip is what I would call uncommitted, meaning they have kind of like their left butt cheek or their left pinstripe on their pants, if they're a right-handed hitter, pointing at the pitcher. And this is important because it allows us to do a lot of things. The biggest of which, one of the biggest is all right, that foot lands, and now our rotation starts. We're going to throw our back leg. We're going to start that hip rotation to start our swing. And with our front foot in total contact with the ground, so toe down, heel down, with that foot closed, parallel to the front line of the batter's box, that rotation kind of gets funneled to the center of the field. So it makes me most powerful to the middle of the field. And in doing so, I can hit equally well to like each gap. So left center gap to right center gap, and middle, I'm most powerful. Whereas if you look at it from the other perspective and I'm landing open with my front foot, now your front foot is the start of a chain of things on your front side. So it goes front foot to your front knee, to your front hip, to your front shoulder, to your head. All of those things do whatever front foot tells it to do. So if you're landing open, everything else is going to open, and now you're going to be powerful to the pull side of the field, but not as powerful middle, not as powerful the other way. And when you start getting pitches that aren't fastballs in the middle or inner half of the plate, they're harder to hit. So if you get fastballs away, or if you get anything off speed, those are pitches that require your hands to stay back so you can adjust to a slower speed. And so I've been going through all of our hitters this last couple weeks, and a lot of guys have this problem where they don't get to what is called a good launch or loaded position, which is just the the second your heel hits the ground, what do you look like? And, you know, Mike Trout is a good example. Everybody talks about, you know, if you're a young hitter, look at Mike Trout. And there's reason for this. But if you look at Mike Trout when his front foot lands, he's really wide in his base. He's not a very tall guy. Really wide in his base. He's about 50-50 weight split on each foot with athletic knees. His butt's back, so he's got a little bit of flexion in his hip. And his hands are in a really powerful position where basically if you like took a bat out of Mike Trout's hands, he'd still look like he could punch you in the face. Like he's in a strong spot. And so it's like, if I can get one thing out of all of our hitters, it's getting to that position. So after they've loaded and that front foot hits, get to that spot, they'll instantly become better hitters. Because the problem is they're all opening up with that front foot and then leaning over their front leg. And by doing so, you force your hands to start early, and now you instantly become a worse hitter because you're, first of all, weaker because the thing that's providing the power you're now out in front of, so your hands are out in front of your back leg. That's bad. And then if I do throw you, if I'm a righty and I get that lefty changeup or that righty curveball, I just have there's nothing I can do. My hands have already committed, so I have to just keep going. And so that's when you see those kind of like butt out ugly swings where guys are like flipping their bats at stuff. It's because they got fooled on a pitch and they got forced into starting their hands early. And it's funny because that adjustment of landing closed on your front side, in theory, is really simple. Where you go, hey, get to this position, then swing. This position, then swing. But the instant you ramp somebody up to full speed, that it goes away because it's so ingrained that basically what happens is they start their rotation before their foot hits. And a lot of guys, what they do is they'll go toe down. They'll go toe down, and before they get their front heel down, they'll start the rotation. And the reason this is bad is because imagine you had a board, a 2x4, and you sunk a nail into one end. You'd still be able to kind of spin it around, right? But if you sunk a nail on the other end, it'd be rock solid. And that's what happens when your heel hits, is toe down is one nail, heel is the second nail. And so
it's a good analogy.
Yes. And so a lot of guys just land with that toe, and then they start the rotation. They spin until that second nail hits, and at that point it's too late.
Yeah.
So if you're a young hitter out there, that's like, do this very simple homework assignment. Go to YouTube, look up your favorite player's slow-mo, and go frame by frame, which you can do by, you know, hitting the little arrow key on your keyboard, and go until you see they load up, they go to get their foot down, you see their toe hit, you see their heel hit. Freeze them right at that minute and look at them. And then your job is to go into a mirror and you do your load and you try to get to that exact same spot. Because the last thing I'll say here is infinite number of stances, infinite number of loads. You go to a baseball game and you see 18 different hitters, you're going to see 18 different stances, and everybody loads kind of differently. But at heel strike, there's one position to be in. There's one launch position. Wide feet, closed front side, athletic knees, butt back, even weight distribution, powerful hands. Everybody looks like that, with very, very few exceptions. And I know that pitching has like analogous positions where it's like, you know, guys do different things, but there's certain positions that are checkpoints to like a good mechanical throw or hit. So that's what I've been working a ton on with our hitters.
Yeah, and that makes sense because they're basically the same. So with a hitter, you know, you stride and you load, and with a pitcher, you stride and your chest kind of recoils and you're leaning in that same position. And the goal is not have any of your upper body start to rotate until that front foot hits to the ground. So with pitchers, it's typically your flat foot or your heels that's going to hit down first. And once that hits, we're looking at, you know, where's your upper body. And if we see any rotation early, we know that stuff's going to suffer. Your velocity is going to suffer. Your arm angle is going to change a little bit. Your hand position is going to change. So your breaking ball, your changeup quality is going to change. And it's eerily similar it's eerie how similar hitting and pitching are.
And I know
just from the stretch shortening cycle, all the shoulder hip separation, that stuff, they're just very, very similar.
And I know you and I have both commented on, you know, if we're side by side, tunnel to tunnel, I can look over at one of his pitchers and know pretty closely what their swing is going to look like, and then vice versa. You can see how a guy uses his hips when he swings and go, I bet, you know, he's going to have this, and this issue when he comes over to pitch, because they're just like very fundamentally very similar movements. I'm a little ignorant of this. Why is it bad, or what's happening when a pitcher goes toe down first?
To me, it's just indicative that his weight has shifted forward a little bit. Because if your weight stays back, it's almost impossible to land on your toe. If your weight goes forward, it's almost impossible to land on your heel. So for me, it's not necessarily that it's like better to land on your heel. I think it is better in the sense, well, that's a lie. If you land on your toe, it basically locks you into wherever that toe is facing. So if you land with your toe, and this is what happens with most kids who land with their toe, they're typically landing with their toe. If it's a righty and the catcher is 12, they're typically landing with their toe point around 2. And because they're just like not rotating back open, they just like don't know how to use their hips yet, and their weight's not staying back. So when they land at 2 on their toe, all their weight's going to then go on the ball of their foot as their hips start to rotate, and then the heel is going to plant. And because that toe already has weight, and now the heel plants, kind of like your 2 nails analogy, now that foot's solid and it really can't rotate open anymore. So now their hips are stuck too far closed, where your knee and your ankle have enough flexibility to rotate about one
Hour.
1 hour. Yep, 1 hour on the clock. So if you land at 1, I think you're in great shape, because your ankle and knee can then align your hips to 12 to straight towards the catcher, which is what you need to do to get as much hip rotation and allow your arm to move more naturally. But if you land at 2, you can feel it. You can do this at home. Point your toe to 12 o'clock and then try to rotate your hips all the way through. Like they just get stuck somewhere around 1 o'clock, where you just like don't have enough flexibility in the hips anymore, or the ankle and the knee. So when you land on your flat foot or your heel, number one, it just keeps you in the air a little longer. So you almost never land on your flat foot at 2 o'clock. Like it just wouldn't happen. You'd land at 1 or at 12. And if you land on your heel, it almost doesn't matter where you land. You can, because you land on your heel, as your hips start to rotate a little bit more, it'll align itself. So if you land on your heel at 2, it would probably rotate towards 1 right as the rest of your foot planted. Or if you land at 1, same thing. It'd probably rotate as you land or it rotate towards 12 as you start to plant your ball, your foot. So that's one issue. When you land on your toe, it just kind of locks you in that spot and you're stuck. And then B, like I said, if you see someone who uses their weight shift properly, they don't really land on their toe. Zach Greinke is one example. If you look at him on slow-mo, he lands on his toe, but it's still like very slight. It's not like a crazy toe down. And then he's still Zach Greinke. Now, could Zach Greinke, is that still a flaw? Like, yeah, I think it still is. Now, is he an amazing pitcher? Yeah, but that's just like high-level sports. You know, not everyone's got perfect mechanics. I didn't have perfect mechanics. You know, I hate critiquing guys who are better than me. But the vast majority of major leaguers land on their flat foot or their heel. The vast majority. And then, again, there's always some outliers that there's like, hey, this is how my body works. And that's completely fine. But, you know, Greinke could maybe throw a little harder if he landed on his heel, perhaps. I mean, a lot of these guys, not to say that they're getting every, you know, drop of velocity or whatever squeezed out of their body, because they're all not. But anyway, the vast majority land on their heel because their weight stays back so well, and that just precipitates them keeping more of their weight back and then landing on their heel or their flat foot.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, and that is like, you know, I use MLB hitters as examples up until I don't. And like, you know, Donaldson's a good example where he's, or like Hunter Pence, I remember he used to talk about him a lot, because just like,
hey, you guys, I'm going to hit a double.
I mean, yeah, you just look at him, and he looks like an absolute joke, and then he goes 3 for 4 with 2 doubles, so it's like, ugh. But there's just like, you know, it's annoying as an instructor, because you're trying to like kind of cherry pick the examples, but every once in a while there's like someone who does the contradiction to what you teach, and you're like, well, this kind of stinks, because it's like, you know, that guy's 6'4", 240, and he's runs a 6'8", and he throws 95, and it's like, you can't necessarily teach to that exception, because MLB players at the end of the day are like the top 1% of baseball players in the world. So it's like, it's hard sometimes to use them as examples, where it's not, Johnny 12-year-old doesn't need to model himself after Zach Greinke, but you try to pick out like the most, like the common things. It's like there are inevitably going to be exceptions, but it's just like those guys are animals.
Yeah, and especially with hitting, like, you know, on my team last year that I coached, our best hitter didn't have our best swing. He had a good swing, but it wasn't our best swing, like mechanically if you broke it down, but he was by far the best at barreling the ball up. Colton, talking about you, so congrats, buddy. And that's what you get, like with a lot of these major league guys, like they all have like, they all have elite, amazing swings. But the little variations where you might be like, oh, this guy's swing is better than this guy, but this guy hits 270 in the big leagues, this guy hits 340. Those are the variations in like your vision and your coordination, and just it's not clear why some guy hits 350 in the majors and some guy doesn't. Like, why does Jose Altuve hit 350? It's not because he's like got a better swing. He's just a better hitter. He like reads stuff better. He gets he's got a more accurate barrel, right? He just like can barrel the ball up.
I simultaneously love and hate Jose Altuve because he's super fun to watch, but he's
everyone thinks it's okay to be 5'8".
exactly. He's like giving people who are 5'4" a pass, and it's like no,
Yeah.
no.
Dustin Pedroia was the same way. If you looked at Dustin Pedroia's swing, it was like a lot of moving parts, and it just it felt like it looked out of control. You know what I mean? And it's fine. It looked out of control, but he just got the barrel to the ball extremely well. He was just really good at barreling stuff up. Even though he's a smaller guy, he could hit home runs when he wanted to. And Altuve is a very similar way. They're both very, I think, comparable players.
Yeah.
But,
if you're 5'6" and Kristen Scrappy, you can make it to the bigs.
Yeah.
Well, maybe.
But, yeah, I mean, that's just the difference between athletes. And I think good kids that we work with understand that they're not trying to emulate anyone specifically, but they just we use big leaguers as examples to say, like, look, we're not making this up. Here's what your boy does, you know, for the Angels or the Dodgers or for the Orioles, or I guess not the Orioles, but you know, so just like, hey, you know, this is why we're talking about it, why we're explaining it. So that's why I think it's okay to cherry pick like the example that really fits a kid. Like I try to use left-handed pitchers more with left-handed pitchers because they can like see themselves in that guy. You know, if you're a lefty, you might relate more to watching Cole Hamels in slow motion, who I think has really clean, like pretty mechanics, compared to just like, you know, like a Jake Arrieta. Like they're both great pitchers, but he's a lefty. Like that's me. You know what I mean? So
I was just gonna ask you. I feel like I see a lot of Arrieta, and are those like your go-to guys? Who do you go to like archetype? Look at this guy.
I don't go to Arrieta, although I think he's a good example in exactly what we're talking about, because he strides so far across his body. You would never teach anyone to do that. I mean, it's way across his body. He does a lot of things that you wouldn't want someone to do. Well, I guess that's just really just the main one. He just strides, I mean, an entire foot across his body, but he's super flexible, and that's just like how his body works. He's a good example of a guy who the Orioles tried to straighten him out. They tried to clean his mechanics up, quote unquote, and he sucked. I mean, he sucked as an Oriole. And then he went back to the Cubs, or he got traded to the Cubs, and they said, look, you're successful at Texas Christian. There's a reason you're a high draft pick. We're going to let you just do you. And so he got to like kind of throw the way he always threw, and his stuff came back, and he became obviously a dominant major leaguer. And some people, you just can't change certain things about them. And that's something I look for as a pitching coach is it's not necessarily, you can't just fit everyone into the same mold. And like for me, for example, when I pitched, I always had a good amount of like rotation where I wrapped around my body. And I straightened out a little bit more every year because I knew that was like an issue. It wasn't a great thing to do, but I always had some degree of it because that's just like how my body uniquely produces force. So you can't necessarily just take everything away from some pitchers to make them like look like the archetype. They're still just like a little bit unique, and I don't know. And it's the same thing with hitters too. So it's I don't know. Like you have just all these variations. You just can't take away from the fact that sometimes you can see it when like this is how this guy goes boom, and like when his body really like all the force happens at once. And you don't want to like ruin that moment by like making him either too fast or too slow or just like changing some fundamental thing that intuitively you kind of assume is like core to them doing that.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I had this conversation with one of our better younger hitters where, you know, he'll get a ball over the middle of the plate and he'll kind of work out and around it. And, you know, you really want to see him take that pitch middle with backspin and elevation. But he's a lefty, and he gets that ball middle, and he's going to hit it 350 feet into the right center gap. And it's like, do I want to take that away from you? Do I want to like pound you into submission and go, no, don't do that. Don't hit doubles to right center. Try to hit a single in the middle of the field. It's like, no. And so what I explained to him is like, listen, if you really thrive taking balls middle and on the inner half of the plate and just ripping them to right field, like that's fine. You just have to have the ability. You just can't have such a big hole on the outer half of the plate. Like, and he was very receptive to that and does it pretty well, where it's like, if you just show the ability at some point over in a game that a pitcher can't just throw, you know, that righty just can't go change up away and get you out. You have to be able to even serve that up in the left field for a hit. And then the pitcher goes, oh crap. Like that's not a thing, I guess. So playing to your strength is there's a lot to be said for that. I think lot to be said for that, I think. And then just like, especially the younger guys, just teaching them, you know, how to we talk about buckets a lot, how to fill up their weak buckets of like, you're not great on the outer half of the plate. Let's work on that a lot, but your strength will always be just smashing balls pull side, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you look in the major leagues, like you still have guys that they shift them and they don't care. They still just hit into the shift, and I think that's starting to probably work less now than ever. However, you just have to be good at what you like, really good at what you're doing. So if you want to be like I only pull the ball kind of guy, you can. But anytime they throw the ball in the zone where you pull that, like they throw it in or half, you can't miss it. That's the big thing. You have to pull that pitch with authority every time you get it, or just an extremely high percentage of the time compared to other people. So if you're going to ignore the outer half of the plate and just like take or whatever, okay. But when they do come in, because it might be one pitch per at bat, you have to drive it.
You can't miss it. You can't hit 330 on the inner half of the plate, knowing that you're going to hit 100 on the outer half of the plate.
Yeah, you've got to hit like 650. Because again, it's good reason, because they're going to average out. You're going to swing at a certain percentage of pitches away, or they're going to force you to swing at a certain percentage of pitches away that are going to, like you said, you might hit 100 on the outer half of the plate. So you got to hit that 500, 600 on the pitches in. And that's that. And pitchers will make mistakes. They'll always make mistakes there, but good hitters don't miss them when they get their pitch. That's the big thing. I mean, you see Joey Gallo. I saw a tweet yesterday that said he might hit 40 home runs this year, and absolutely no one might notice. I guess he's hitting probably like 200 or something, but he's got like 30 plus at this point. I don't know. I mean, we could debate the merits of that.
Yeah.
But it's he's a guy who he doesn't hit the ball the other way. He hits taters or flies out, and that's pretty much it. And certainly he's going to need to adapt, because you can't hit 220 with 40, can you? I don't know. Baseball's changing. Maybe you can.
Maybe you can. I guess if you hit 40 bombs and you have 125 RBIs, but
you wonder you wonder strategically how they start to handle that, because say there's guys on, do you pitch to Gallo, or do you I don't know, because he's so all or nothing. You could easily just walk him, or you could easily just
K him up. I mean,
yeah,
it's like you're rolling the dice, basically. Like he's either gonna roll over a ball or he's gonna take me deep. Like, that's pretty interesting.
I mean, with no one on, there's like no threat. He's either out or he hits a home run, so it's kind of like whatever.
Right.
But with I guess a couple runners on, it changes a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of it's curious
who hits behind him too. I don't even know.
I don't know.
I wish I could remember. I've been sitting here trying to think this whole time. I remember I was looking at it was just a couple days ago. I think it was actually on The Athletic. I was looking at somebody's spray chart, and it was literally every bomb they've hit was to the right side of the field. Like nothing past like right center.
Yeah.
And then I think I was actually looking at Chris Davis's, and his is like foul line to foul line, like an even distribution of bombs like across the field. It's like fascinating, because because I think those guys were pretty similar in terms of total home runs, but it's like one guy's all to one field, one guy's like, how does that happen? I guess it's that phenomenon exactly where, that guy who's driving everything to right field, he's a left-handed hitter. He's just like super duper good.
Is this Chris Davis from the A's?
The K.
Or from the Orioles?
K.
Chris Davis. I was going to say, because there's no way Chris Davis from the Orioles has a comparable amount of home runs as Joey Gallo. But okay, Chris K.H. Davis.
Yeah, it wasn't Joey Gallo, but it was someone like that, And but I think that's the phenomenon. It's like, let's say they both have 30 home runs. That guy who just smashes balls on the inner half of the plate, and the other guy probably doesn't smash those as well, but he hits middle and away equally well. So it's just two different approaches, I guess. But it's just, and that's the other thing is, I guess there can't be enough said about how good those guys are, because those are big league pitchers who everyone in the park knows, if he's going to take me deep, it's going to be pull side, and they still can't not get him to do it. So it's like, that's nuts.
Yeah, and it's just weird to. And you look at some of these guys like Ryan Howard just retired, and Chris Davis might go down. The other Chris Davis from the Orioles might go down as the worst major leaguer in history for one season, which is astonishing considering how much power he has, and considering that he's had some good seasons. He's really like up and down every year, but it's you just wonder how you suddenly struggle so much at that level when you've been able to do it at that level, right? Like, it's not like, I don't know, your bat speed decreases that much. Obviously, as you get older, you can't hit the hard stuff quite as well. I don't know how things have worked out since, but I know early in the season there was an article about Paul Goldschmidt that he had basically a 0 batting average on fastballs above 95, which I found really interesting, that he was already losing a couple ticks on his swing or whatever it was, that he just was not hitting fastballs, hard fastballs. And obviously they figure all that stuff out now, and with all the analytics, like everything is just known now. But it's
yeah, you wish you could figure that out, because I mean the list of guys who are just like lighting it on fire for a season or two and then completely drop off the face of the planet. That's such a long list, and it's like, what is it? Is their eyesight? It's they just get figured out. Like they, like you said, they like lose a tick or two on their bat speed, and then now all of a sudden they can't hit anything. Like, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I don't know what's come of him, if he's gone that trend. I haven't followed up, but I found that to be a really interesting article earlier in the season. And of course, it's not like then you take that information and you say, well, how do you best use this? Because it's not like if you throw him 7 96-mile-per-hour fastballs in a bat that he swings and misses it all, because that's not the case. So the question is, I think it's basically just like, if you're late in the game and he's coming up, you probably bring in one of your hardest throwers. But then the question is, well, how do you attack him? It's still probably, again, you can't throw him all of those pitches, but it's probably just what I've discussed with pitchers before, that if that's your kill pitch, then you're probably just like starting him off with some breaking stuff early, some soft stuff, trying to steal a couple strikes. And then once you've stolen 1 and hopefully 2 strikes, then he's going to get doses of fastballs until he's done. That's probably the outlook.
That's a fascinating stat, though.
Yeah, and they were wondering what was going up with him. I wish I'd have followed up with that, but there's a lot of really interesting. That was like probably May or June. But for a guy who's as good as him, that seemed surprising, because you're always, especially him. He's like he was 1 year removed from like all-star caliber season last year, something like that. So you wonder what's changed.
Super awesome for the last like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and just quietly as like a. Because no one really pays attention to the D-backs, but yeah. So hitting's a fascinating thing.
Well,
ladies and gents.
It kind of goes the other way too, because if any of you out there are Cub fans, you look at Javier Baez over the last couple of years, just like zero plate discipline, could not swing at a slider off the plate away, and then this year he's figured something out, and now he's like smashing, like 30+ home runs. I think he's got 300+ average, like over 100 RBIs, and it's like, what happened? The pitchers probably didn't start pitching him differently. He just like, I don't know how all of a sudden do you stop swinging at those frisbee sliders that run away from you? I guess he did, but
yeah, I think it's just a subtle change where I think as a hitter, especially when you're a younger hitter like him, you start to learn through failure, and obviously he had tons of veterans around him and great leadership, and then they explain, like, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to focus on. Like, your approach has to change. Here's how. And then you go out there and you really do it because of failure. And this mirrored my own career, where when I started to struggle or I reached new levels, I had to, like, really bear down and, like, put all my brain power into making this approach change or this whatever change. And he probably, like, had that. And, like, okay, now he, like, starts to get it. And it's kind of like when you see, like, a car you like. We talked about this the other day. In our previous episode, where like you see like, oh, I look at that car, it's a brand new model, like that looks like, I love that car, and then you start seeing it all over town because your brain is really ready to notice it. What was that theory called or whatever?
Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, I think it's called.
So that phenomenon, and so it's kind of the same thing. Like he like focuses up and then realizes, oh, that's like I have to take that breaking ball, I have to take that slider, I can't swing at this pitch. And then he starts to do it, and then like he can do it after that. Like he's activated that part of his brain, and he can recognize that spin or whatever it is, or see what they're doing. And then as he starts to take some of those pitches that used to easily get him out or get him down the count to where he was then screwed, now those are balls, and now pitchers have to change course. Like the whole bat changes. Like a 1-1 fastball in the corner, if it's a strike, now it might be slider, and he's done. Mm-hmm. That 1-1 fastball in the corner is a ball because he doesn't swing at it or whatever, doesn't foul it off. Now it's 2-1. Now he gets another fastball and he drives it or whatever. So those little subtle changes make a big difference, and a lot of times it's just getting you from going, taking that negative route from going to 1-2, and now I'm down the count. Now anyone's going to strike me out on a dirty slider versus now I'm ahead in the count, and now I get more pitches to drive. And then pitchers know they can't just like toss a slider in there and he's going to whiff at it. So probably just a confluence of factors, and then just seeing more pitching. Some of those guys, they struggle early and they have to struggle at the big league level because they're better than the minor leagues. And then once they just get their feet underneath them, they just keep getting better and better and better. Some guys don't. Some guys just wash out. It just depends. But it seems like he's always had the skills and the athleticism and all that, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
which that kind of leads me into my next thing, which is one of the several reasons that fall is my favorite season is now I know you're kind of the same way. I'll actually start watching some baseball now that we get like late into the regular season and into the postseason. And I mean, postseason baseball, for as much as you and I joke about baseball being boring, it is, but postseason baseball is pretty fascinating, especially, the short series and the kind of like the strategy behind when they're bringing in relievers and just like watching the individual at bats. Like there's nothing better than a really good hitter facing a really, really good pitcher. Like I'm obviously Cub biased, but I love watching Anthony Rizzo hit in the Joey Votto is one of my favorite hitters of all time, just to watch their at bats. Cause Joey Votto never gets to be in the postseason, but that's just like postseason baseball is great just for that reason, that kind of like watching and not to sound like a snooty piece of poop, but there you go. There was my poop quota. But I think a lot of people miss that too. Like everybody else is just a 1-1 count, but just like when you put yourself in the head of the hitter and the pitcher, and you're like, what is he going to throw right here in this 1-1 count, just based on what the two prior pitches were or his like previous at bats. That's what's best about baseball, and really it's impossible to stomach that for 162 seasons. Like or 162 games. Yeah. Like it's just exhausting. Really, that's why I don't watch baseball as much in the regular season. It's just I find it exhausting. It's just like, ugh. But when you can for a month in October, it's fun.
Fun times coming up, folks.
Yeah. Well, that's all I got for
playoff baseball.
For episode 53. You got anything else?
Nope. This was Twinsies.
See ya.